you to today's session. We've just as part of our Stakeholder Advisory Council, we're taking a brief break to share with what hopefully will be a very interesting session. The title of today's sessions is really around community insights and looking at, from a community insight perspective, what their experiences are with sorry, turning that off. To ensure that, as we were saying, one of the things that's most important about any kind of grievance mechanism is that their effectiveness is really about their own engagement in that area, and that they themselves decide really how effective any of these grievance mechanisms are. And so that's why it's so critically important for us to get that perspective. And we have around the room today some very important people, including, I don't know if you're seeing this on camera or not, but on our right, Stephanie Amoka, who's joining us from Accountability Council. Thank you, Stephanie. Our moderator today is Professor Damiola Oluyi. And finally, on my immediately right is a member from a CSO in Uganda, Birudo, who has worked on a case recently with us, Payel. So there to start us off. So what I wanted to give us a little bit of a case study, first of all, and to see how we can take that through. So one of the recent cases that we've dealt with at the independent recourse mechanism is that of the Wadlai irrigation system. And we're very pleased today to have, in addition with one of the CSOs who is working on this case with us, Birudo, who I mentioned also, but also a community member as well. And so let me just, they've can share my screen here, but I don't know that I've been given rights yet, so. Try it again, no. Can you share a screen with me? Can you give me the rights, yeah? Still don't have them. All right. Okay, looks like we won't get to share our screen. So let me just briefly give a big overview then of the case. So this was an irrigation project in Wadlai in Uganda. It was something that was approved by the AFDB board in 2016. And let me see, just take care of our. And it was essentially an irrigation scheme, one of them in Wadlai and the Pakwatch district. So it was part of a whole irrigation project throughout the area. So the Wadlai irrigation scheme was designed to have about 1,000 hectares, 365 hectares of which was existing government-owned and prison land of that. Now, around 3 years later to the project, started in 2019, the local government decided to substitute the prison land, which was originally slated to be a host of the irrigation area, with a new piece of land, and that land was that owned by the Patton Clan land. And as I said, here today we have a representative from the Patton Clan community with us today. And during those conversations, we had they were informally asked at that point, the clan was, if they would be willing to provide land for that particular project. And of course, the Patton Clan had a history of being very receptive to types of projects. It had donated a number of bits of its land previously, and indeed the prison land also was from the Patton Clan as well. In that initial chat, the Patton Clan leader and the community had really thought that the government was referring to a piece of land that the clan owned, which was close to the Wadlai irrigation scheme. The whole area was on the west side of a particular road, and the chief then, in that understanding, showed his willingness to give the land for a project, as they had done with other community purposes as well. The project implementing unit, and in this case this is what we call the government or the local government authorities, then informed the bank during the midterm review in July of 2019 about the change in the land of the project. So they would no longer be using the prison land, they would now be using this other land from the community. And the bank was okay with that. Now, no further request was made for information to ensure that the land indeed had any existing encumbrances upon it. And that the community was properly consulted and gave their consent to the use of land. So none of that took place. The project implementing unit, the government official authorities in here, did not provide the bank, and consequently also the bank did not request any assessment of the potential impacts of that inclusion of this land into the project could generate into the patent claim. For instance, through what would normally happen in a project of this case would be a resettlement action plan. So after the change in land was made, some meetings continued, of course, as things do. Conversations happened between the local government and the patent clan, represented by its chief, the Yago Kak, in this case, Onan San Neo Dowdy. And although the community largely supported the project in principle, the information wasn't all that clear. There was a question in terms of the size of the land. There was a question about where exactly it was, the land they would be accessing, which they initially talked about was now no longer the same land that they had talked about. And so this had kind of shifted over the time. And so the chief and the community, as one might understand, were concerned then about that. The information wasn't very clear. So they weren't given clear information about what was involved in giving their land for the project. And what the authorities, however, wanted was they wanted consent, and they wanted quite quickly. The main piece of land for the patent clan and where they derived much of their livelihood is on the east side of the main road, so opposite the side that I had indicated earlier. The patent clan did not give their consent to that land, and they feared that the main source of then their livelihood would be lost. And this community land is usually also the area that was occupied quite a number of widows, single mothers, and others who would derive their livelihoods from the community land. That's not to say that other patent clans didn't have other owned land, individual land, that was also part of this project. But the community land is really what's at the heart of this area. And so the chief communicated that the project did not have the consent of the patent clan. Although the project did not have the consent of the community through their chief, and there was no resettlement action plan or any other type of assessment for that matter in terms of baseline assessment or benchmarks on how the construction and the operation of the irrigation would affect this community, because you have to remember when construction happens, it's going to disrupt the community. Normal patterns where they might take their livestock or gardening or where they're growing crops might be disturbed. So none of that was really discussed at that point. So the project then initiated construction suddenly and without proper notice informing them of that. The leadership and the community viewed that, understandably, as a forced occupation and a violation of their basic rights. The authority then used force against the community in the face of community protests, and construction began despite the objections of the community. So this finally taken us to the area where, up to date, where the community has lived through this process. The community continues to be afraid to use their land, not knowing which land is going to be there. And the works that have been advancing have destroyed plants and vegetations that they would have used in their daily subsistence and for their animals. What has been communicated to us is that they continue to be afraid of violence and of reprisal of what's happening on the ground, and they think their land has been taken away and they won't be able to use it again. So that's the setup of the project, and at that point, and I think this is again a public report that's put out in terms of our compliance review, but that might say largely the picture, and then we can take it from there, because you have some great guests from you, and so we have now then run a compliance review process working with the community, and part of it is to figure out a little bit more about that process. So we'll turn it back over to our moderator at this point, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. I think the context you have provided will be really, really useful in the panel discussion. As David rightly mentioned, the purpose of the session is to just take a look at the community insights on the IRM and its effectiveness. Of course, the best way to know how effective anything is to ask the users or those that are meant to benefit from it, and through that process we can learn what has worked very well, what could be improved upon, and what could be the future directions in terms of strengthening our processes. So it's great that we have such a distinguished panel to be able to share their insights with us based on their own work. Of course, as David mentioned, we have Paulel, who is Executive Director of the Bolisa Initiative for Rural Development, Burido, who has had more than 18 years experience working with Burido and being an advocate for land rights and community engagement in that regard. We also have Stephanie Amarco, who brings very strong perspectives from our work with Accountability Council. She's been working as a policy advocacy in the policy advocacy program for several years, and she has strong experience in international human rights advocacy, especially efforts to protect human and environmental rights in internationally financed projects. And of course, CV is quite extensive, in addition to being an active participant in several initiatives at the international level. I should mention specifically that she sits as a member of our Stakeholder Advisory Council in the IRM, African Development Bank. So she will bring both perspectives from the field as well as a knowledge of the IRM process. So I think I'll probably just start with Paulel to get your view from the CSO. So how did the CSO engage with the Pattern clan community and the IRM to address some of the concerns raised, as David has wonderfully summarized?
After the chance of the committee complaints about were not fully consulted, their concerns were not considered. There was the issue of violation of their rights. So, but as the civil society, the community reached out to us because we are working in that place. We do a lot of community organizing. And of course, through that engagement, we also try to engage the government to understand and also put them together with the community as a third party. We got ourselves as the third party because community thought we can play a big mediation role between them and the local communities and the government. But the bigger things that we see is that the government, sometimes the borrowers, sometimes they don't look into the civil society role, the key role in play, they play, and also the trust the project affected persons have in that. And the project affected person, like in this case, they trusted us in terms of giving them the information, because we play bigger roles in actually giving them information on how they can access remedies. And we also told them there is a bank independent accountability mechanism that they can use. And indeed, they use it and they put out their complaints to the independent recourse mechanism of the bank, which the process went on, and now the community is happy that the compliance report is out, which I think it also hit the bank of not doing the due diligence, especially in respect to the safeguards. So that is one of the big things, but we move a long way with the community in that process, organizing them, building their capacity, put out the complaints, and it comes with so many things. It rights, the language, technologies. So there was actually a lot of things, but also commitment from the communities. And that was the key thing, because we as a civil society, we also experienced challenges, because we were also actually stopped from reaching the community, interacting with them. So it is actually this community that at times feed us with a lot of information, because we build their capacities, and most of the time that they do a lot of evidence base. And I think IRM team can appreciate that in this project, community had a lot of evidence. Whatever they put across, it has evidence. So
I think I should quickly push further on that question. I like the point you made about ensuring that community voices were there and considered in the decision-making process. So what specific strategies would you say you employed as a CSO to ensure that that community voice, was heard clearly and included in the process?
One of the key strategies that we employ was actually putting the community into the center of their issues, because it was their own issue, their own problems. For us, we had no interest in that. They reached out to us as third party. They thought we can be the right people that can help them, connect them with the government. So we said, no, this is not our issue. You need to be in the center, forefront. You take your issue. So that was the only main approach, the strategies that we employed, and they help us a lot.
Thank you very much. I'll be back to probe further on that. I think, speaking about ensuring transparency and impartiality during the process of handling complaints, that's something that independent accountability mechanisms worldwide, need to strike it with balance. It's always, an issue that requires constant development. So I want to ask you, Stephanie, based on your experience reviewing independent accountability mechanisms, what do you think that such mechanisms can do better to ensure impartiality, to improve transparency when handling complaints?
Thank you, and thanks for having this great discussion today. So my organization, Accountability Council, we accompany communities to file complaints at independent accountability mechanisms, and also engage in policy advocacy and research to ensure that these mechanisms are strong. And the criteria that we look at includes the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, effectiveness criteria for accountability mechanisms. That includes transparency and fairness as criteria. And so I think what IAMs, as we call them, independent accountability mechanisms, can do is to recognize who is approaching the mechanism. So these are communities that may not have even known who is financing the project, that the African Development Bank had an involvement in it. They have busy lives, they have other things going on, and now they're facing challenges that can affect their livelihoods. And so it's incumbent on mechanisms to recognize these contexts and ensure that these processes are fair to communities, that they're not overly burdensome, that for instance, communities can file complaints in their own language. They don't have to file in English or French, which are the main languages of the bank. That they can have advisors. So some accountability mechanisms don't have stricter rules on who can advise communities through the process, which is, as you can imagine, if you're fighting for your rights, you want to be able to bring in whatever support you may need. So understanding these contexts, I think, are contextual elements rather, are really helpful for accountability mechanisms in their work. On transparency, there's two levels of transparency that's important. It's important for there to be a level of transparency and predictability for the communities that are engaging. So what we don't want to happen is that they file a complaint and it's a black box and they don't know what the next steps are. They don't know who to get in contact with if they have any questions, etc. But then there's also transparency for the broader stakeholders. So people who are interested or even shareholder governments to the bank, they should know what are the issues that are being filed on
Great, thank you very much. In fact, I was going to probe further on that, especially given that you mentioned the UNGPs and aligning with human rights standards. So,
implementers, etc. But when issues come to the mechanism, they also can play a role in preventing further abuses. So one recommendation that civil society has is for accountability mechanisms to have the ability to recommend that even a project be paused while an investigation goes on so that further harm doesn't happen. What we've seen in different cases is that yes, an accountability mechanism process can be started, but meanwhile, the project is continuing and it's continuing to cause harm. And so is there any way to pause that process before going forward? There's also the element of, do people feel safe to even raise their voices? And again, there are other actors that have a responsibility in ensuring that there's civic space to raise concerns, but the mechanisms themselves can put in measures that can help, including allowing for confidential complaints, protecting identities within the institution, facilitating meetings in a way that doesn't expose people to further harm. But it is a challenge that we see in our work a lot.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen. I'll come back to you on that because that's a very topical one in terms of ensuring that community complaints are addressed in a timely manner and in a right-based manner. But I'll go back to Paulo, just talking about the complaint handling process. Can you share with us maybe the successes or setbacks you think you experienced while advising the community in terms of the complaint handling process, or the success stories and challenges from your experience?
response because they responded and they stood by their concern. So they reach out to us, but we give them advice. We supported them, and they stood by that. They took it forward. That is a success to us. That is one of the success. The second success is that, locally within our country, there were not much take on complaints that's coming out from the community. But we see that there are so many civil society, regionally, internationally, came out on board to support us, put out the issue out, reach out to different directors, and also different rapporteurs. So that was also a very big success to us. But of course, also a big success again is the response from the independent recourse mechanism of the bank, because they responded very fast and they took the matter quick, much as there were some hiccups in the middle, but their process and the way they responded was good to us, you see. And of course, even the report itself is a success because there were so many allegations, but the investigation they did and unearthed some of those allegations. And those are a success that also cleaned our white shirt, which some dots were put on. So those are also a success, which to us we are happy about it. Yes. Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I guess, ensuring that the voices of the stakeholders are heard, amplifying their voice, ensuring that they stay informed, from what you've described, are very, very important to you. So I'll take that back and just follow up on that issue and say, what more could be done in terms of by IAMs to ensure that all relevant stakeholders and their voices, especially affected communities, how can we ensure that they are adequately informed and that they are involved as well in the complaint and then process?
Yes, thank you. So in our work at Accountability Council, we engage in the policies that guide these mechanism processes. And so each mechanism usually has a set of rules that guides what they will do from when they receive a complaint through helping communities decide whether they want an investigation or want to be in a mediation process, through what are the institutional responses and how things will be monitored. So we encourage institutions as they're developing these rules to, again, think about the context of the people who are using these mechanisms and how they can make sure that this process is available for people to access justice. And so, for instance, when filing a complaint, not requiring communities to know exactly which policy was violated, because if you're not internal to the bank, how would you know which policy is violated? But instead to just simply present what they're experiencing or what they fear could happen, because it's not always about addressing harm that's happening, but to also flag, we're concerned that this could happen if this project continues in this same manner. There are also points along the way where we've seen at some mechanisms in the past where the institution has been given an opportunity to, say, review a draft report, investigation report for factual issues, but that same opportunity has not been given to the communities, and so it's not a fair process. And so we've really pushed for those imbalances to be changed throughout the process and mechanisms. And we're happy to say that the IRM's policy, which was changed in 2021 after significant civil society engagement in the review, reflects better practices and best practices that we see at accountability mechanisms. Yes, please.
Great. Thank you very much. I think I would just ask both of you questions about, looking ahead. I think I'll ask that, and then maybe I'll be happy to open it up to the audience for any follow-up question that they may have. So the question is, what lessons do you think we can say we've learned from the Waterline case in terms of improving future interactions between the communities, CSOs, and development projects? And what specific suggestions would you have for the IRM's complaint handling process based on the Waterline case?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the bigger lessons learned is that the information gap. And this information gap, it is in two ways, both to the project affected persons. Sometimes the project implementers, they tend not to give full information. They give half piecemeal information, which is so dangerous. And it makes community not to understand. By the end of the day, you get a lot of confusion like we are seeing in wildlife irrigation scheme. But of course, also another information gaps is for project implementing teams. And even we realize that even sometimes even the bank management staffs who execute the project, who take lead as maybe tasks, they also, sometimes they don't have, they have some gaps in some of these policies, the safeguard policy, the bank policies themselves. And that one also, of course, affects the projects. And also politicizing the projects is something that sometimes is a very big issue that affects the project implementations. And of course, also some lessons that we learned that much as sometimes you get banks, management have leverage on the borrowers, but sometimes they don't put it as a tough condition to take that advantage. So at times they tend to be a bit softer, and it creates an avenue to the borrower to also keep violating, keep doing wrong things. So that is also some of the lessons that we have learned. And of course, also you found that sometimes the projects are more militarized. If wave community said no, you found they use militaries, use police, and that one creates a bit of intimidations into the project's affected persons. So it's like chasing them away because people become more fearful to go closer to the project and support the project. They start building fear and they run away. Those are also some of the lessons that we realized, and also opening some intimidation cases like criminal cases against the project affected person, not knowing that the project is theirs. So we need to invest a lot in organizing them, making them understand, but we open those criminal cases against them. They are arrested every day, there and then. So those one also put them away from the project, and it affects the projects much. And of course also involvement of civil societies. You know, sometimes we play a bigger role in helping governments, but if we are misunderstood, by the end of the day, it affects the projects. Because I think I'm happy that bank is already trying to, they have already strategies on engaging civil society right from the initiation of the projects up to the monitoring. So
As strong as possible. But there's a reality wherein even if you have like the perfect mechanism process, where in this case the IRM is doing every step that they're supposed to, there's a larger ecosystem that this process is operating in. So I'll leave it to the patent clan and others to assess the IRM's performance in this. It sounds like they were very satisfied with the investigation that happened. But now it's time for the African Development Bank and the borrower to act upon the investigation. So harms have been identified. What are the concrete steps that are going to be taken to address those harms? And so I think that's really where the challenges going forward. Hopefully, in a year, we would want to, if we had a conversation like this again, we would want to hear that these harms have been addressed and that people can move on with their lives. And so I think that's my charge to the bank, to the Ugandan government. There's also the element of lessons learned. Even if you have a good process that can address harm, we want to prevent harm in the first place. You don't want the same things over and over again. And Accountability Council, we have a database that has all the complaints that have been filed to these mechanisms over the last 30 years. And if you looked at issue, it's lack of consultation, and I think access to information and disclosure is maybe the second issue that comes up in complaints. Paolo said earlier. So how can the African Development Bank learn from the lack of disclosure and the lack of consultation challenges in this case to prevent this from happening to other African communities? Because the goal at the end of the day is sustainable development that benefits African people.
Fantastic. Those are very profound. Prevent any adverse human right impact, as well as addressing them in a timely and effective manner, an efficient manner when they arise. Of course, I have a few more questions, but I don't want to overhog the mic, so I will throw it open now. Yes, exactly.
Yes, thank you very much. I am by name Ovonji Dennis, a member of Paten clan or community from Wadlai, Uganda. We are one of the affected community. We in fact have experienced a lot in the project. The community suffered a lot. The community were beaten, and all these are coming as a result of communities were not consulted well. The projects were just imposed. We realized that the implementation already started taking place. We were not informed. The community structures, the leadership of the traditional system is there. We were not consulted. They were not even contacted. And there was total lack of consent. Up to today, the community have not consented. And in the same, they are to bring forces. You find the police, the Uganda People Defense Forces, and other security agencies are no longer interested in this project at all. Due to some of those I have tried to put forward, the continuous arrest and detention, trials in criminal cases, yet they need the land. Others have lost jobs. Very many community members do not stay in the homes now. They're outside the community. Those are some of the different impacts of the projects we are facing. However, we are very grateful to Bulisa Initiative for Rural Development Organization and other partnering organizations to whom we went to, and they were able to raise our voice, and were able to file a complaint with the IRM, and very grateful that the report is out. We are expecting, I hope, the implementation on the recommendation that the IRM has already come out with. Otherwise, we had remained so much vulnerable if they had not come to our rescue. Leave alone that, the community also had to file a suit with the government in a high court, and the hearing process and the rest has been closed. We are now waiting for judgment, which has never been passed. We pray that it should come also well, and we expect the court outcomes. Whether on our sides or on the side of the government, we are not bothered, but we wish it comes out so that we are able to know our position as a community. So that is brief. I would want to say, in conclusion, the project is no longer wanted by the community at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dennis. I would invite any other question, comments from the audience? Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Damilola. Thank you to the panelists. It was really great hearing from you, from your experience. And I have one question for the community representative. Now that the project, the community doesn't want the project anymore, what is the step forward? What is the decision? Is there a decision now to interrupt a project because of that, or is still ongoing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Amid these many challenges, the project was imposed on the land. Fine. We never gave in consent. Yes. And the project activity continued on the land, but to a certain point, I don't know what happened. They have not yet finished it on that very land. But indeed, it is something being forced. The project is meant for us. We are supposed to own the project. We utilize the resources that our government tried to get for us, but we were not aware of it. We didn't even know that our government was so mindful of us. So with that lack of knowledge about the project, definitely we have nothing to do and we don't know the project totally. I don't now know what they will have it as a take, but our position, I think, stands that the project is not of any benefit at all to us at this point round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I think. Okay, yeah, if you can maybe read out one or two of them, we'll pass the mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a question to, I think, Dennis. What project is then needed by your community? This is one of the questions. And there is also another question about how communities can file a complaint, how to identify a project, the financier of a project, by the Multilateral Development Bank, and how to file a complaint. This is.
Thank you. So before I turn it to Dennis to respond, I think what I will also add to that, and I would hope the panelists can reflect on, is that with development projects, there is always that tussle, because you find the state saying, oh, there was engagement, there was consultation, there was environmental impact assessment. You find the community saying there was no consultation or it was not sufficient. So it's always a question of how to address that balance. So that would be something I hope both our speakers can reflect upon after we hear from Dennis.
Yeah. Yes. I think. Yeah. You know, going through so many intimidations, RS, lose your job because of the project. So it can create something that you get a community say, oh, this project, it looks like it's not for us. Why are they intimidating us if it's for us? So I think that is the environment where the community are in now. That is why they can say, we don't want the projects. So the issue still lies in the hands of the implementing teams, that what can we do to remove those trauma the community went through so that they get to accept the projects. Because when you look at this case, it's about consent. People are saying, who is the project for? So I think that is the major thing that the implementing teams and the bank management need to look into it. How do they remove the trauma so that the community have that interest? Because what makes them saying no is the intimidation. Very many cases they went through. Yes.
very great point on about enhancing community acceptance of development projects in the first place. So I think it's we're turning to Dennis on that point. Looking forward, looking ahead, how can we ensure community acceptance of development projects in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope the best thing the government could do if they want to establish a certain project, especially in our community now, they need to do sufficient consultation. They need to find out from the community what project best fit them with the resources that is learned that they have, so that the community are able to identify that we need this particular project, so that we are able to play an active role in it. That is actually what I could say. And on the other issue of the complaint filing, I think Pauliel has made it so nice. Exactly, too much fear. And the key informant within the community structure, they are not there now. How are they that these issues can be put to be resolved? It's quite very difficult. And how are they going to trace some of these people who no longer now stays at home? That's the problem. So the whole thing is at mess. The few livings, they see government vehicles, people run away. Meetings comes, no attendance. People, on the start introduction of the meeting, people are not there. So all these are challenges because of trauma. And military, when they see police, they see soldiers, the way they were beaten, the way they were tear gas, rubber bullets, and the rest. Definitely somebody feels this is the same thing is going to happen again in some few minutes. Why must I remain here? One by one, till everybody disappears. And that is the state at which we are in right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dennis. Those are very fun. Yes, you have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, thank you very much. I think from what they are saying, it would be good also for IRM to strengthen preventive measures, like maybe to be able to intervene even before the approval of a project by the bank. I don't know how is the process, but it would be good if they can intervene before even the selection of a project to make sure that community are really involved, and then that the project respond to the need of the community, not just imposing project to the communities because we think this is what they need for their development. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can respond to that, and then also how communities can file complaints. So for that, on that issue of even before a project's approved, fortunately the IRM's rules, this is a practice that we encourage at all accountability mechanisms, allows communities to file complaints before a project is approved while it's still under consideration. So again, giving those power over those decisions feedback to say, before you proceed, there are these challenges that we want addressed. When it comes to how you can file a complaint, I think Dennis has raised some very harrowing aspects of just the civic space issues of do you feel safe. But from a process standpoint of how can communities even know who to complain to, the bank has requirements on the borrowers and the project implementers that they have to, as a part of their consultation processes, share what the grievance mechanisms that are available, including the IRM. And so ensuring that is actually done is important from the bank side. Again, in the context of even if people feel safe to do that. But my organization, one of the things that we do with communities who approach us who have issue with a project is that if they haven't received information on who's financing the project, who's involved, we can look on the websites of the different institutions to see what the project documents are, who's involved with the projects, what the different elements are, and then share that with the community. And there are other groups who do that as well. And so that's kind of how civil society tries to come along communities to help them engage.
Great. I think we've had a lot of very important points on how to improve community acceptance of projects in the first place, ensuring that community members are carried along to even make the decision about projects, as well as ensuring that they are carried along in the complaint handling processes on any adverse impact that may arise from a project. I think in wrapping up, I would ask our speakers closing thoughts.
Yeah, I think the key thing is now participation and capacity buildings of all the stakeholders that engage into that specific projects. So once the borrower realizes that these are the community will be involved, different institutions will be involved, they need to do a lot of capacity building and ensure that there is participation right at stage one, so that by the end of the day, yes, so that everybody is on board, and also avoiding issues of militarizing the bank-funded projects. That is the key things, because it creates a lot of intimidations actually into them. Yeah.
Yeah, there are many points along the way that can be improved, but I think my call would be to have a mindset shift among the different actors in development. Who is development for? It's for the people. It's to make people's lives better. And so when these very people are then raising issues about a project, having the perspective of this is not a threat, but this is actually helpful feedback direction and go in a different direction. And so we just call on, again, the bank, various governments, the private sector, to see these complaint processes, again, not as a threat, but as an opportunity to course correct and really contribute to sustainable development.
Thank you very much. I think you would agree with me that we've had very, very profound and wonderful discussions on how to further improve the effectiveness of independent accountability mechanisms, especially the complaint handling procedure. So please join as well as Stephanie and Marco, Accountability Council. Thank you very much. I think I'll pass it on to David for closing remarks, after which we will take maybe a group photo.
No, that's great. I'm looking at some of the online comments, and I think what we'll do is we'll have a chance to review them. I'm looking at our communications fellow. He'll have a look at those, and we can respond to those in kind. The one thing I would be very neglectful is not to also recognize the work of our moderator. So please give them a hand for some able work. Thank you very much. I thought this was a fantastic session, and certainly learned a lot as well from the contributions. So thank you very much. And I wish everyone a pleasant morning, afternoon, wherever they are online, and thank you very much for joining us.